Tonight, a massive FBI raid in Bel Air has exposed a nearly $2 billion trafficking empire hidden inside a charitable organization.
4:17 a.m. Bel Air, California. Fog rolls thick off the Pacific, settling into the canyons like a gray shroud. The streets are dead quiet. No traffic, no dog walker, just the distant hum of the 405 freeway and the soft glow of security lights on multi-million-dollar estates. 3 black Suburbans roll to a silent stop at the base of a private drive. No headlights, no sirens. The engines cut simultaneously, and for a moment, there's nothing but the sound of tactical boots hitting pavement. FBI, DEA, ICE, DHS, Special Investigations. 47 agents from 4 federal agencies, moving as one coordinated unit toward a 12,000-square-foot mansion that property records show was purchased 18 months ago for $14.2 million in cash. The buyer on paper was a nonprofit foundation called New Horizon Humanitarian Services, a charity supposedly dedicated to refugee resettlement and community support. But tonight, federal agents are about to discover that this mansion wasn't a headquarters for charity. It was a command center for one of the most sophisticated trafficking operations ever documented in the Western Hemisphere. The breach happens at 4:22 a.m. Flashbangs detonate at 3 entry points. The front door comes off its hinges. Agents in black tactical gear pour through every opening like water through a broken dam. Inside, chaos. Men scrambling from bedrooms. Women screaming. Someone tries to run for a back staircase with a laptop under their arm. They don't make it 6 steps before they're on the ground with zip ties around their wrists. In the basement, agents find something they weren't expecting. A room that looks like a Wall Street trading floor. 12 computer monitors, satellite phones, encrypted communication equipment that FBI cyber specialists later identify as military-grade. And on the main screen, frozen mid-transaction, a wire transfer for $800,000 to an account in Dubai. But that's not the worst of it. In a climate-controlled vault behind a false wall, agents discover filing cabinets containing documentation on over 4,000 individuals. Names, photographs, transit routes, payment records. These weren't business files. They were inventory records, human inventory. Each file contained a price. Each price had been paid. The seizure numbers from that night alone would make federal history. $18.7 million in cash, 43 kilograms of heroin, 2.1 million fentanyl pills stamped with logos designed to look like legitimate pharmaceuticals, gold bars valued at $6 million, and servers containing encrypted data that would take FBI cyber forensics 3 weeks to fully decode. But it was what they found in a locked briefcase in the master bedroom that changed everything. A single encrypted hard drive. And on that drive, a file labeled simply Operation Crescent. 72 hours later, FBI Cyber Forensics Division, Los Angeles Field Office. The analysts have been working in shifts. Coffee cups pile up like monuments to exhaustion. The fluorescent lights never dim. And on the central display screen, a network diagram spreads across the wall like a cancer diagnosis. Operation Crescent wasn't just a trafficking ring. It was an economic infrastructure. The hard drive contained detailed records of a network that had been operating for over a decade, moving drugs, money, and human beings through a system of shell companies so complex that tracing any single transaction required following threads through 14 different countries. Here's how it worked. The network established legitimate-looking businesses across the United States, trucking companies, import-export firms, medical billing services, childcare centers that existed only on paper but collected millions in government subsidies. These companies generated clean revenue on their books, while their actual purpose was to move dirty money through the international financial system. Money flowed from Los Angeles to Dubai, from Dubai to Nairobi, from Nairobi to bank accounts in the Cayman Islands, and then back to American real estate investments that looked completely legitimate. But the money was only part of it. The network also moved people, thousands of them. Victims promised jobs, education, opportunities in America. Instead, they found themselves trapped in forced labor, domestic servitude, and worse. The transit routes were mapped with terrifying precision. Entry points through Mexico, secondary movement through Texas and Arizona, final destinations in California, Minnesota, Ohio, and Washington State. Each route had designated safe houses. Each safe house had managers who reported to regional coordinators. Each regional coordinator answered to a central command structure. And at the top of that structure, FBI analysts found a name that made them stop breathing: Marcus Delane Okonkwo. On paper, he was the executive director of New Horizon Humanitarian Services, a respected community leader, a man who had testified before state legislatures about refugee integration, a man who had shaken hands with mayors, city council members, and at least one congressional representative at charity galas. But the encrypted files told a different story. Okonkwo wasn't a humanitarian. He was a logistics commander. Every shipment of drugs, every convoy of trafficked victims, every wire transfer to overseas accounts required his digital authorization. His encrypted signature appeared on over 7,000 transactions, spanning 9 years. He had turned a network of charitable organizations into the perfect cover for a criminal empire. And he had done it while smiling for photographs at fundraising dinner. But Okonkwo wasn't operating alone. The files revealed coordination with a figure the network referred to only as the architect, someone inside American government whose job was to ensure that enforcement pressure never reached the network's core operations. The next name to surface was fictional State Representative Denise Harmon Wells. For 6 years, Harmon Wells had served on the California State Assembly's Budget Committee. She had influence over funding for law enforcement, social services, and refugee resettlement programs. And according to the encrypted records, she had received over $2.3 million in payments routed through 4 different shell companies, all tied to Operation Crescent. In exchange, she had done things that seemed small individually, but catastrophic in combination. She had advocated for reduced funding to human trafficking task forces. She had pushed for policy changes that made it harder for local law enforcement to cooperate with federal immigration investigations. She had sponsored legislation that expanded access to government benefits programs, creating exactly the kind of paperwork pipeline that the network needed to generate false identities and fraudulent claims. This was not corruption. This was command-level collusion. This was not negligence. This was engineered protection of a criminal enterprise from the inside. And investigators were only beginning to understand how deep the rot extended. December 15, 2025, 5:47 a.m. Federal Joint Operations Command Center. Undisclosed location, Southern California. The room looks like something from a military command post, which it essentially is. 50-foot digital displays show real-time satellite imagery of locations across 6 states. Red markers pulse on the screen, each one representing a target identified through the Operation Crescent files. 47 primary targets, 12 secondary sites, over 200 individuals flagged for immediate arrest. The operation commander addresses the room. Today we execute the largest coordinated enforcement action against a foreign-operated trafficking network in American history. We have 1,200 federal agents deployed across California, Arizona, Texas, Minnesota, Ohio, and Washington. We have support from state police in 4 jurisdictions. We have air assets standing by. On the screen, the markers begin to pulse faster. Every team moves simultaneously at 0600 hours local time. No exceptions, no delays. And we hit them everywhere at once. Or we don't hit them at all. The raids begin as the sun breaks over the desert. In Phoenix, Arizona, a DEA tactical unit breaches a warehouse that satellite imagery had flagged for unusual heat signatures. Inside, they find a fentanyl pill press capable of producing 1 million pills per week. The equipment alone is valued at $3 million. The raw materials on site could have flooded the streets with enough fentanyl to kill half the population of Los Angeles. In Minneapolis, Minnesota, FBI agents move on a network of childcare centers that had been collecting government subsidies for children who didn't exist. The fraud total from this single network exceeded $47 million over 3 years. Much of the money had been wired to accounts that investigators now know were controlled by Operation Crescent. In Houston, Texas, ICE agents raid a trucking company that had been operating as a legitimate freight hauler for 6 years. But hidden compartments in 18 of their vehicles contained documentation for a human smuggling corps that had moved over 3,000 people through Texas into distribution points across the Midwest. In Seattle, Washington, a joint FBI-DEA team hits a luxury apartment building. 3 floors had been converted into what agents described as a command and control center for West Coast distribution. 14 individuals are arrested. Servers containing financial records for $200 million in transactions are seized. And in a quiet suburb of San Diego, federal marshals arrest a man named Dr. Raymond Castellanos, a licensed physician who had been writing over 4,000 fraudulent prescriptions per year, feeding pharmaceutical opioids into a distribution network that stretched from California to Ohio. By noon Pacific time, over 300 arrests have been made across 6 states. The seizure totals read like fiction: $112 million in cash and assets, 41 kilograms of heroin, 63 kilograms of cocaine, 4.7 million fentanyl pills, 17 kilograms of methamphetamine, documentation on over 8,000 trafficking victims, and server farms containing encrypted records that will take federal analysts months to fully process. The underworld took more damage in 6 hours than it had in the previous 6 years. But the operation wasn't finished, because the files revealed something that changed everything federal investigators thought they understood. understood about this network. The corruption extended deeper than anyone had imagined. When FBI analysts began cross-referencing the seized financial records with law enforcement databases, they found patterns that made veteran investigators physically ill. 17 law enforcement officers across 4 states had been receiving regular payments from shell companies tied to Operation Crescent. The amounts varied. Some received a few $1,000s per month. Others received hundreds of thousands over several years. But the pattern was consistent. These officers had access to information that was valuable to the network: raid schedules, investigation targets, informant identity, Border Patrol deployment pattern. In California, a deputy sheriff in Riverside County had been receiving $12,000 per month for 3 years. His job was simple: notify his handlers whenever federal agencies requested local support for trafficking investigations in his jurisdiction. That advance warning gave the network time to move assets, destroy evidence, and relocate personnel. In Arizona, a Border Patrol supervisor had been taking payments to ensure that certain sectors of the border remained understaffed during specific windows. Those windows, investigators now realized, coincided exactly with documented trafficking convoy movements through the Sonoran Desert. In Minnesota, 2 detectives assigned to a human trafficking task force had been feeding investigation details to network coordinators. They had effectively neutralized the very task force designed to stop the operation they were protecting. The honest officers who discovered this felt something beyond betrayal. They felt contamination. Years of work, cases they thought they had lost due to bad luck or insufficient evidence, victims they couldn't save, perpetrators who seemed to vanish just before arrests. It wasn't bad luck. It was internal sabotage. One FBI agent who had worked trafficking cases for 15 years described the feeling in his debrief. "We thought we were fighting criminals. We were actually fighting our own colleagues. Every time we got close, someone tipped them off. We never had a chance." The arrests of compromised officers happened quietly. No press conferences, no public announcements. Just federal marshals appearing at homes and precincts with arrest warrants that carried charges of conspiracy, racketeering, and obstruction of justice. 17 badges surrendered. 17 careers ended. 17 families destroyed by choices that had seemed small at the time but accumulated into systematic betrayal. But the investigation was about to reveal something even more disturbing. Operation Crescent wasn't just operating in America. It was connected to a continental network that dwarfed anything investigators had imagined. The files recovered from the Los Angeles mansion contained references to coordination with established drug cartels operating along the southern border. Specifically, the network had formed logistics agreements with elements connected to the Sinaloa cartel and CJNG. These weren't mergers. They were business partnerships. Operation Crescent provided distribution infrastructure, money laundering services, and political protection. The cartels provided product and enforcement. The fentanyl flooding American streets came through these partnerships. The heroin came through these partnerships. The methamphetamine that was destroying communities from Ohio to Oregon came through these partnerships. And the human trafficking routes that moved victims from Central America through Mexico into the United States shared infrastructure with these cartel corridors. Federal investigators mapped the connections. Trucking routes that moved legitimate freight also moved drugs. Warehouses that stored consumer goods also stored human beings. Financial networks that processed international business transactions also processed cartel profits. And the scale was almost incomprehensible. Analysts estimated that the combined network was moving over $3 billion in illicit value per year through American territory. Drugs, people, fraud proceeds, protection payments, all flowing through a system that had been designed to look exactly like legitimate commerce. The southern border wasn't a wall that stopped this flow. It was a membrane that filtered it. The right shipments got through. The right people avoided detection. The right money reached the right accounts. And the network had contingency plans. One file recovered from Operation Crescent's servers described a long-term strategic objective that investigators are still trying to fully understand. The document outlined a plan to establish permanent operational infrastructure in 3 American states: California, Texas, and Minnesota. The goal was to create what the document called sustainable protection environments, jurisdictions where political allies, compromised law enforcement, and favorable policies would ensure that the network could operate indefinitely without meaningful interference. They weren't just infiltrating America. They were building a permanent presence. They were creating a parallel system that would allow criminal enterprise to coexist with legitimate government, feeding off taxpayer resources while operating beyond the reach of enforcement. And they had been doing it for almost a decade. As I finish telling you this story, I want you to understand something. Power doesn't doesn't always need violence. Sometimes it only needs silence and ambition. And people who look the other way because looking directly at the problem is too uncomfortable. The victims of this network number in the thousands. Women and children trafficked into exploitation. Communities devastated by fentanyl that killed sons and daughters who never saw it coming. Taxpayers whose money funded programs that existed only to be looted. Honest officers whose careers were sabotaged by colleagues they trusted. This story is a warning, not about foreign criminals. They will always exist. The warning is about what happens when our own systems fail us, when the people we elect prioritize ideology over safety, when oversight disappears and accountability becomes optional, when we stop asking hard questions because the answers might be inconvenient. The network described in this story is fictional. The names are invented. Not where the specific events are dramatized, but the patterns are real. The vulnerabilities are real. The consequences of failing to address them are real. If you watch this far, if this story matters to you, share it, comment. Let people know that these issues deserve attention. Not because of politics, not because of party, because communities are suffering, because families are being destroyed, because the systems we built to protect us can be turned against us when we stop paying attention. The price of freedom has always been vigilance, not just against foreign enemies, against the slow erosion of standards that allows corruption to grow in darkness. This story ends here. But the real story, the one happening right now in communities across America, continues. Pay attention, ask questions, demand answers, because silence is how they win.